actually blown out of proportion. Calling me a fucking misogynist, saying I hate women. Fuck you. I've got nothing against women. I've got nothing against black people. Oh, he said a mean thing to me on the internet. If I offend you, deal with it. You don't like what I say? Cry about it. Whine about it on fucking Twitter. Make a video about it.
Do video games ever make you angry? Whether it's an unfair death inducing some gamer rage or just a general dissatisfaction with the game's direction or mechanics, I think everyone watching has at one point or another gotten upset at a game, even if it's one they're a big fan of. Sometimes your complaints are justified, sometimes you're just butthurt. But what happens when your dissatisfaction for a product you once loved boils to such a point that you decide to take things into your own hands? Meet Zesty Jesus, whose real name is Joshua. Zesty is a 28-year-old Texan man who's been a huge fan of Team Fortress 2 and anime for his entire life. Despite what you might expect based on that description, Zesty is not a morbidly obese basement dweller. He's actually an athletic man with a staggering 6'7" stature who works a well-paying day job as a geophysicist. Though he's mostly unassuming on the surface, Zesty Jesus' highly controversial online career as a Team Fortress 2 YouTuber has shaken the game's community to its core and serves as a cautionary tale of how sharing opinions on the internet can end poorly, even if you mean well, and even if those opinions are regarding a 15-year-old video game. Joshua started his channel Zesty Jesus on July 13th, 2016, just to post funny TF2 gameplay clips, though his later move to analytical video essays and streaming are what brought him into the limelight. He built his branding around Zess, his own version of the character Asuka from Evangelion. Zesty has not shied away from being attracted to this character, particularly due to her classification as a muscle girl, and he regularly commissions art featuring her. However insane that might sound, his older age compared to his contemporaries, his natural charisma, as well as the heavily edited and highly opinionated nature of his content made him easily stand out among the crowd of other TF2 YouTubers and helped him quickly gain a small following on the platform. One thing notable about his videos is his unabashed use of copyrighted content. Many of his big videos have intricately crafted intros spoofing anime openings, and instead of compromising his artistic vision, Zesty always opts to sacrifice his videos' monetization to use copyrighted intro themes. Because of this, and how passionate Zesty clearly is about the game, even having a tattoo of it on his shoulder, he quickly gained a reputation in the community as, if nothing else, an exceptionally honest creator. He would often talk about good and bad weapons in the game and why he likes or dislikes them, conducting in-game tests to determine their efficacy. With his real-world background as a geophysicist making him uniquely qualified, and presenting his videos as sort of science experiments with hypotheses and use of the scientific method. And even among people who didn't particularly care for the guy, there was always a degree of respect afforded to him for the clear care put into his content. However, on top of being opinionated, Zesty was more than a bit abrasive as a personality and didn't really have much of a filter. As you could probably guess, these qualities would go on to get him into quite a lot of trouble. One of the earliest major controversies that Zesty embroiled himself in came on March 19th, 2021, when Zesty posted a video to his channel criticizing a third-party matchmaking platform for TF2 called FACEIT. For a little context, TF2 has been facing a terrible botting and cheating problem for years now, and FACEIT's new matchmaking system, featuring its own proprietary anti-cheat software, advertised itself to the community as a potential solution. This was incredibly exciting to many in the community, including YouTubers who eagerly created videos about FACEIT and promoted it as the future of the game. However, Zesty was more than a little skeptical of FACEIT, which made tons of people in the community who viewed it like the second coming of Christ very upset. Zesty critiqued FACEIT for advertising itself as a casual experience despite being largely derivative of the game's competitive formats, for being deceptive about sponsorship deals they'd given YouTubers for promotion, and for having what he called a sketchy anti-cheat software.
I don't trust FACEIT that much, and I recommend that you don't either. Need I remind you, back in 2013, another gaming organization was caught mining Bitcoin on users' computers with their third-party client?
Zesty buckled down on his position on FACEIT, releasing another video lambasting FACEIT and various YouTubers for what he viewed to be a violent shilling campaign for a misleadingly advertised sketchy service. Though he was noticeably calmer in this video, Zesty pushed harder on the angle that FACEIT was being dishonest about sponsoring creators.
It seems as though the vast majority of popular opinions and attention about FACEIT are coming from people that either knew about FACEIT before its public beta release, indicating that they themselves were involved in its development somehow, or two, are likely being sponsored or compensated by FACEIT in some capacity.
In opposing the team behind the service and calling out other YouTubers who had worked with them, Zesty had made quite a lot of enemies in high places, and though his channel was small, the impact these videos had on FACEIT's reputation was anything but. This led to Zesty eventually getting into a public spat with FACEIT on Twitter, replying to a meme they posted to say, "Fewer out-of-touch tweets aren't going to save this dying platform." Then the company's social media media manager, Shork, responded to Zesty's complaint with a cry about it meme, to which Zesty said they actually need to work on this platform if they wanted to succeed, but I guess they're just relying on their social media to direct more transient traffic to it instead. In the moment, some viewed this whole interaction and the offense Zesty later seemed to have taken from the meme as petty and ridiculous. Zesty's use of a stone toss meme for the thumbnail of his video criticizing FACEIT drew the ire of some watchful eyes in the community. For the unaware, Stone Toss is a controversial comic artist who often satirizes sensitive social issues, often receiving the accusation from more left-leaning content creators that he is far-right or outright a Nazi.
Stone Toss is a semi-popular Nazi webcomic.
But since in this scenario, Zesty was fighting against the company's rollout into this beloved game backed by huge YouTubers, this uproar he made about FACEIT gained him a reputation as somewhat of a consumer advocate for the TF2 community. He was willing to express his opinion, even in the face of outright mockery and derision by everyone. And despite Zesty's hostile approach definitely leaving something to be desired, FACEIT's TF2 service has proven to be largely a failure and has not hosted a TF2 game in over 6 months, despite his continued success on social media and heavy funding. Which leaves the case to be made that Zesty was right on the money about the platform's longevity all along. However, this was only the beginning of Zesty Jesus' shenanigans. Perhaps one of Zesty's worst mistakes was to do an AMA on 4chan's TF2 general thread, officially putting him on their radar. His use of the Stone Toss meme and status as a hardcore anime fan makes his use of the site not much of a surprise to anyone, but unfortunately revealing himself as a poster proved short-sighted. Of course, many in the TF2 general community quickly embraced and continued to herald Zesty as our guy, a real and honest creator amongst a sea of money-hungry phonies, as they put it. However, many other posters in the thread wound up noticing that, on top of being highly opinionated, Zesty had a tendency to get very mad at games, especially when he gets targeted. This marks the moment trolls decided to start stream sniping him and DDoSing Zesty every time he goes live, a tradition that carries on today and has caused him to periodically retire from streaming the game from time to time. The annoyance this caused was the catalyst of Zesty's first cancelable offense. While venting in frustration about stream snipers in a private Discord, Zesty referred to those harassing him as mentally ill French T-slurs. This spelled trouble. By this point, Zesty had accumulated a surprising amount of attention for how small of a channel he was, and honestly still is. Him and his antics became one of the most popular things to discuss in the game's VG threads, and plenty of responses have been made to his more opinionated videos. Perhaps most notably was this autistic war between him and another YouTuber named Array7, where the two went back and forth making response videos to each other, arguing over whether TF2 had any future as a competitive game. That being said, none of what's happened so far would even begin to compare to the next chapter in Zesty's career. Catching wind of the slur incident and Zesty's growing status as a content creator, a smaller YouTuber named Whammo then out of nowhere produced a call-out video on Zesty Jesus titled TF2's Worst YouTuber. This video criticized Zesty for being transphobic, evidenced by his previously mentioned use of the T-slur, being ableist, evidenced by him referring to a player he was mad at in-game as a mong.
Don't sit there and farm, you mong!
Oh, and if you didn't catch that, Zesty called JPEG a mong, which is actually a slur for a mentally disabled person.
Being fat-phobic, evidenced by him once writing that fat chicks eat their feelings. Being racist, evidenced by 2017 tweets in which he wrote the N-word with a soft A. And being a bully, for getting a pro TF2 player kicked from his game lobby for farming. This video went somewhat viral in the TF2 community and had a massively negative effect on not only Zesty Jesus' channel, but Whammo's channel as well. And due to the massive heat it received, Whammo later renamed it to TF2's Toxic YouTuber. I guess he thought that was more palatable than worst. It should be noted that by this point, Whammo didn't have the greatest reputation in the community either. To many, he was seen as a sensationalist and clickbait YouTuber, with some even finding it laughable that he saw himself fit to criticize someone else's content and ethics, given his history of taking sketchy gambling sponsorships on his videos when he was younger. His relationship with FACEIT was also called into question. Zesty, being the abrasive personality he is, of course couldn't resist but to reply to Whammo's video with a stream, briefly re-uploaded to his channel, and with a couple of tweets. To summarize, Zesty defended his language against fat women by saying that they were old private comments he regrets making, largely inspired by his own weight loss journey, and stated that the old tweet using the N-word was a reference to the Eric Andre show.
The first tweet was a direct quote from the Eric Andre show that I tweeted out because it was funny. And then the second tweet is me complaining about a homework assignment. Apparently that makes me racist.
He also said that the pro player who he supposedly had gotten kicked for farming was known by the server owner for causing trouble, and that he was booted independently of Zesty's input. Perhaps most interesting, Zesty called out Whammo for being friendly to him in private DMs, even acting like a fan prior to creating this hit piece that tore both of them down. Zesty also detailed the hate he got following Whammo's video release. He describes his personal phone getting flooded, and even briefly sheds a tear describing videos of animal gore and child gore people had sent to his work email. Whammo eventually removed the video, citing the fact that both him and Zesty had begun getting death threats and gore videos sent to them. However, Whammo's attempts to mend the bridge between them was never successful, as Zesty's perception of him had been irreversibly tainted. Whammo and Zesty have both failed to substantially grow their channels since this drama went down, with Whammo eventually leaving TF2 altogether to start a new channel, Internet Anarchist. This fresh start has been a massive commercial success for Whammo, with his new identity as a Sunny V2 type channel, and a well-publicized feud with Aiden Ross helping him gain nearly 250,000 subscribers in less than a year. But Zesty, meanwhile, has been left picking up the pieces of his part-time TF2 YouTuber career, dealing with continued harassment from not just 4chan trolls, but also trans activists on Twitter, all while managing his real-world job. Zesty has stated that since this hit piece happened, he has had his workplace targeted and withstood many concentrated attempts people have made to get him fired. He also claims that one of his harassers once left a physical note on his front door, and that he now owns a 9mm handgun for personal protection. Nevertheless, this newfound paranoia doesn't seem to have stopped him from speaking his mind in the slightest. For one, Zesty has recently engaged in a bit of a war against the game's community workshop. For those who don't know, Team Fortress 2 has a system called the Workshop where fan-made items can be inducted into the game to be sold for a split of revenue between their creators and Valve. This has long been a great way for the game's community and its developers to mutually benefit from one another. However, in recent years, TF2's official support has taken a bit of a decline in activity, and its updates have largely dwindled to seasonal hat crates composed entirely of fan-made items, some of which Zesty considered to be of less than stellar quality or unfitting of TF2's art style. His most common criticism is that the creators of the new items add stuff to the game without taking into account the game's art style or being lazy through the use of clip art and stock images. He even started doing streams where viewers can send in workshop items to be rated by him. Zesty's crusades against the degradation of standards on the workshop has ruffled a lot of people's feathers, with members of workshop communities like the Emporium criticizing him for using his platform to attack and quote-unquote harass people much less popular than him. His rebuttal to this is that he's never intended or instructed people to harass anyone, only criticized them on his own, and that anything is fair game for criticism when you're posting it publicly in an attempt to get it added into a beloved game and profit off of it, which TF2 community contributors tend to do. Since then, however, Zesty has picked up the habit of regularly clarifying to his audience that he doesn't condone harassment of anyone's item he covers in order to absolve himself. On December 4th, 2022, he finally chose to properly address the last of his allegations, being transphobia and a twit longer. I typed the word T-slur a handful of times inside of my Discord. This was in response to a group of cheaters / stream snipers that would bother me while streaming. It was a group centered on 4chan. They were also transgender. They were also French. I called them French T-slurs out of anger as a result. I also typed T-slur in regards to saying they aren't femboys, and also saying that at some point that I didn't realize it's a slur. I also juxtaposed mentally ill with T-slur, which led people to believe that I think transgender people are mentally ill. And I think I typed T-slur once when referring to a weapon name that contained the word in TF2. All of this was nearly 2 years ago. Someone screenshotted this, and it's been circulating the web ever since. I offended people by using the T-slur, which I do understand is an offensive word. It wasn't my intention to offend people, and I'm sorry if I did. I'm not transphobic in any way. I genuinely don't care how people live their lives, nor do I hold the belief that transgender people are mentally ill. I called this group of cheaters / stream snipers mentally ill because I believe it takes a certain level of mental depravity to go out of your way to stalk and harass someone online. However, when people began replying with instances of him liking posts from far-right provocateur Matt Walsh, Zesty's defense seemed to only make things worse in the eyes of the Twitter mob formed around him. I don't believe trans women should compete in the same sports leagues as biological women. I agree with Matt Walsh in that children should be treated very differently when it comes to identifying as trans. I don't hate trans people, no matter how much you want to believe it. The lengths you go to constantly hunt my profile for this shit is honestly disturbing. You dig through my likes and follows. It's not healthy to be this obsessed with someone. Move on. If you didn't know, invoking Matt Walsh might as well be invoking Hitler on Twitter. So despite his best efforts to convince them otherwise, people still widely consider Zesty a transphobe on par with someone like J.K. Rowling. And if anything, his reputation as such is worse than ever before. To many who feel upset with the modern state of TF2, Zesty Jesus remains an underdog champion, but through his brashness and his habit of feeding trolls, he's also quickly become a punching bag for many of the game's popular community figures. He routinely gets mocked by content creators several times bigger than him, such as Soundsmith ratioing him with a trans rights image, and Uncle Dane commenting on a compilation of him getting stream sniped with LOL. Solar Light, a TF2 YouTuber with a sub count over double that of Zesty's, tweets about him constantly, and even once ran a campaign to get him suspended from Twitter, and he's often ruthlessly mocked by thousands thousands of others on the platform, despite his attempts to defend himself and apologize for his wrongdoings. This post he made lamenting on the removal of the image spray system was brigaded by people calling him a Nazi and a porn addict. And in general, making fun of Zesty has become one of the community's favorite pastimes that's always guaranteed to bring laughs, no matter how far you take it. This user made it to the front page of the TF2 Reddit by spending $100 to display a message to everyone playing the game at one time that Zesty Jesus sucks cock and trans rights. Or how about people making fake AI apology videos by cloning his voice? The lengths people go to shit on him honestly sometimes gets a little bit creepy. Zesty's streaming audience is pretty humble, but he seems to sometimes have a habit of not realizing who might be listening. And well, when you're a public figure, you kind of have to be worried. He has a lot of hate watchers who constantly clip him to try and get him in trouble anytime he makes a small remark about another creator he might not like. They claim Zesty is commanding waves of targeted harassment, despite the fact that his Twitch usually only broadcasts to about 100 viewers at a time. He's now attempted to change gears in his videos about TF2 item submissions, focusing more on praising good community-made items rather than tearing down bad ones, but that doesn't seem to have had any effect on his reputation. Most recently, he's taken a stand defending decals in-game. Basically, TF2 has a system where you can upload user-made images to the game and put them on certain items, such as a melee weapon sign or a badge worn on your character's chest. And there's recently been tons of talk in the community about how these sorts of things should be removed due to the fact they are sometimes used to display hate symbols. In response to this trend, Zesty did a whole video in June defending this feature's existence and pointing out that, though he is in support of a toggle to disable displaying them for streamers, removing decals altogether would be kind of silly since they've existed for over a decade now and are a pretty well-established part of the game. Overall, it doesn't seem like Zesty's planning to stop ruffling feathers anytime soon. However, despite this hate he gets and the hate that people claim he's responsible for, there's a case to be made that on top of having one of the most memorable runs in the TF2 community, Zesty has also maybe had more of a positive impact on the game than most other TF2 YouTubers. People in the TF2 community have loved to criticize and call Zesty's maturity into question ever since he began expressing opinions about the ecosystem and community surrounding the game. But the workshop content in-game has gotten measurably better since he started his tirade against it. And some have even pointed out the fact that items he specifically praises have often been getting added. In a video released shortly before the Smithmas 2022 update, he specifically showcased 6 cosmetics, all of which were then added to the game just a couple of weeks later. In the midst of this video being made, the summer 2023 update also released, featuring one of the most slick weapon war paint cases the game has seen in a long time, which some members of the Emporium have blasted for being too safe and dubbed the Zesty Jesus collection. This suggests that the attention Zesty directs towards items he likes is actually having an impact on what gets added in the game, which is more than can be said of a lot of other creators. Additionally, the Smithmas 2022 case is widely considered to be one of the best the game has received in years. There's no way around it. Despite the torrential hate and harassment he and his family gets for it, Zesty's policy of publicly dissuading bad cosmetics and affirming good ones seems to be doing good for the game. His impulse to explain himself does often dig his hole deeper. But all in all, he's for better or for worse definitely one of the most interesting people to come out of the scene and has become one of the most notable creators in the TF2 community in a very long time. He's definitely done a lot of brash and easy to criticize things, and there's no denying he often puts himself in the line of fire by expressing his opinions so flagrantly. And frankly, he makes himself a pretty big target with his weird anime branding. Like, bro, what is this? You didn't need to do this. But whether you see Zesty as a desperate lolcow or just an interesting online personality, it should go without saying that no one is deserving of having their workplace contacted and being harassed in the real world over video game opinions and old tweets and Discord messages. Getting mean comments on your ugly Vor Pride TF2 skin doesn't constitute harassment either. I've been Jerky Jom, and until next time, squeeze me a bone.